Okay, we're in our unit for transformations, and the first one that you learned about was translations. Now we're going to learn about rotations. Rotations are a little bit more difficult than translations were. A lot of rules with rotations. A rotation is when an image turns to produce a new image. If you ever need to pause, go ahead and hit pause and make sure that you can catch up with the notes that you need to, or if you miss something, feel free to always go back whenever you need to. So here's a couple other vocabulary words. These are not on your notes yet. You need to go ahead and put these in. First one is center of rotation. The center of rotation is the fixed point, fixed meaning it does not move, around which the image rotates. Usually, actually always in the rotations that you're going to be doing, the center of rotation is the origin. So that means that 0, 0 is where everything's going to be rotating around every time. And your third vocabulary for this section is angle of rotation. So there's two things we need to know about all rotations. One is where do they rotate around, and then the other is the angle of rotation. And there's two pieces to angle of rotation. The degrees, and then also whether it's clockwise or counterclockwise. So angles obviously can be measured in degrees, and we're going to be talking about 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270, and 360. And then is it clockwise or counterclockwise? Clockwise obviously is the way that the hands on a clock go, and then counterclockwise is the opposite direction. So there's vocab that you need to remember. Again, if you need to pause, go ahead and pause. I'm going to go to the next slide right now. Okay, so here we have two triangles. We're going to use blue to represent the pre-image and red to represent the new image or the image. Let's go ahead and get those labeled. If there's no color, then the way that you can tell which one's the first image or the pre-image is it's the one that doesn't have the apostrophe after the letter. So just the ABC is the pre-image, and then the A prime, B prime, C prime is the new image or just the image. So here's the center of origin, or I'm sorry, the center of rotation. It's the origin. And this blue image rotated 90 degrees clockwise, and you can tell because of the angle that point A is to the origin and then point A prime to the origin. So the angle that it creates is a 90-degree angle, and it rotates clockwise. So that's how you can tell how an image rotated. You can tell which direction, and then also the angle at which it rotated around the origin. Is, if you need to, you can draw a line from a certain point to the origin and then to the correlating point to the origin also, and find out what the measure of that angle is. So let's see what happens to the coordinates here, because we want to formulate a rule for the coordinates when you rotate 90 degrees clockwise. So here I went ahead and wrote down the points that we have for triangle ABC. And then we want to find out what happens to the points and how, or the coordinates, and how do they become A prime, B prime, and C prime. So go ahead and look at that for a little bit. See if you can come up with any ideas. There's a clue right there. I went ahead and gave you the coordinates for A prime. So you can see we went from A being 3, 2 to A prime being 2, negative 3. So can you see what happened there? There's the rest of the coordinates. Can you see the pattern that's happening? You probably notice right away that the numbers are reversed, so the x and the y value are switched. But then there's something else that happens too. You switch the position of the x and the y, and oops, it looks like my writing didn't show up there. After you switch the position for the x and the y, the original x, and which is the new y, becomes negative. So you change the sign of the original x. So let's take this triangle and rotate it 90 degrees clockwise. Here are your points. So you remember our rule. xy becomes y negative x. So let's take 2, 0. Remember, we have to switch the positions. So we changed it to 0, 2. And then the original x, which is the new y, becomes negative. So let's do the same thing on b to b prime. We're going to switch the positions, 5, 2. And then the original x, or the new y, becomes negative. And then the same thing for c. We switch 6, 5 to 5, 6, and then that 6 is going to become negative. Let's go ahead and plot those points. So there you can see what the rotation looks like, and I'll go ahead and draw those angles in. There's the 90-degree angle from A to A prime, and then it doesn't have to be A that you use. You can use any of the points. So if you use B, you can see that that one creates a 90-degree angle, B and B prime. And C prime, that also creates a 90-degree angle. So each point is rotated 90 degrees clockwise. Again, if you need to pause or rewind, go back, go right ahead. Now we're going to talk about rotating 90 degrees counterclockwise. So you have the rule for 90 degrees clockwise. This is 90 degrees counterclockwise to the left. So here I have the same triangle, or when I drew it, I thought it was the same triangle. My coordinates are wrong, but I'll change them here in a minute. Remember, we're going counterclockwise now, so we're going the opposite direction. So what do you think the new rule will be? Here is a little help for you, although this one doesn't help a whole lot. So again, we switch sides, but I don't see any negatives there. It must have to do with it being a 0. But what we're going to do is, again, like you notice, you switch the positions, and then the original y is the one that becomes negative this time. So here we switch 2, 5 and change it to 5, 2, and then make the 5 negative. Take 6, 5 and change it to 5, 6, and make that 5 negative. And then here's where I realized, oops, I counted wrong. Those 5s should actually be 6s because I drew the triangle too big. Sorry about that. That might make things a little bit confusing. So here's your new points and your new triangle, and you can see if you kept going and rotating again and then one more time, it's going to kind of look like a windmill, and keep rotating all the way around. So let's label A prime, B prime, C prime, and then you can see the 90-degree angle that we create between each of the correlating points. Like I said, there's a lot of information on this video, so now we have another image, and we're going to actually rotate this one 180 degrees. This one's a lot easier than the other two, so this shouldn't be too tricky. So here's the cool thing about this. No matter what, if you rotate it clockwise or counterclockwise, if it's 180 degrees, it's going to be the same rule. So you know how to rotate something 90 degrees, and then if you rotate another 90 degrees, that gives you the 180. And again, the rotation, the center of rotation is that origin, so you can see that that line, the 180-degree line, goes right through the origin to create the new point D, D prime. So can you see what happened from D 4, 1 to D prime? D prime looks like it's -4, -1. See, that's a pretty simple rule. All you're going to do is change each sign for each coordinate. Oh, I wrote that rule wrong. Be sure you do not copy that down. Sorry about that. I just noticed it. The rule should actually say xy becomes -x, -y. Sorry about that. Make sure you do not write that one down. But these are correct. So 5, 8 becomes -5, -8. 7, 6, -7, -6. And then 7, 1 becomes -7, -1. Here's your 4 points. And there's your new image. You can see that it rotated all the way around. It could have gone all the way to the left or all the way around to the right. Either way, it ends up in the same place. And that looks a little messy there, but that's just to show that from A to A prime, and from B to B prime, and C to C prime, and D to D prime, all of those are going to go directly through the origin. They go right through the center of rotation. Again, make sure you have the rule written correctly. xy becomes -x, -y. So here are all your rules. Oh, good. I wrote it right this time. Okay, so, but here's something interesting. Because I told you in the beginning, we're not just going to do 90 and 180. We're also going to talk about 270 and also 360, but I didn't touch on this on 360 here. So, but I'm going to show you how to do 270 degrees. So you notice this point right here, I just rotated it 90 degrees clockwise. Well, what if it were to have gone counterclockwise and ended up in that same point? That would have been 270 degrees clockwise. So you can see that 90 degrees clockwise is going to give you the same position as rotating it 270 degrees counterclockwise. So that's the same rule. And then the same thing goes for 90 degrees counterclockwise. That's the same rule as 270 degrees clockwise. That makes things a little bit easier that some of them share the same rule. And then 180, again, it's the counterclockwise and the clockwise are the same rule for 180 degrees. And that is rotations. So make sure that you've written down each of those rules. You will have another chance to write those down when you make your foldable in your notes. And you will want those written down, and you'll want to try your best to remember them. It sounds tricky right now, but you'll start to get the hang of it after a while. See you next time.